Okay, cool. Feeling a lot more relaxed. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Just want to, before we go any further, have silence and honour for acknowledging that we are on Wurundjeri land today. We're also neighbouring Bunurong land, and I would like to pay respects on behalf of all of us to all of the elders and ancestors who have cared for this country and made it possible for us to live here, even though majority of us live here at a cost of great violence and incredible dispossession that is ongoing every day that we're here. And so our acknowledgement should never become tokenistic. We need to be really mindful of whose country we walk on and what it has cost for us to be here today as settlers if you are not a First Nations person here. Also honouring and paying respects to any First Nations people who are here today. And yeah, Shay, would you like to say a few words?
I'll just say thanks everyone for coming tonight. My name is Shay, I'm one of the co-facilitators with Aisha. Thank you so much to all the curators who worked really hard on this exhibition and the wonderful artists who made beautiful work for the show. We're going to have a little bit of an artist talk, so I might just kick it off and give the floor to you guys. Yeah, congratulations. Hi everyone, so just some introductions. This is Angela, this is Carla, I'm Uswa, and this is Ilili. So basically this exhibition sort of was, we thought of it during the second lockdown, and this was during September and October of last year. And so during our meetings, we sort of thought of the processes that artists go through and the different ways we come up with work. And some people like to work from a conceptual starting point, and some people like to work from a visual starting point. So we thought about the idea of using a conceptual prompt to sort of kickstart a project. And we also talked about the artist's drawing game, Exquisite Corpse, which some of you might know of, where you draw on a piece of paper and then pass it on, and the next person can only see a little bit of the drawing, and you end up with a full drawing that multiple people have contributed to. So the idea of this exhibition is kind of a combination of those two thought processes, where we put out two prompts that Angela and Lily came up with, and we invited artists to speak to the prompts, and also we took little sections of each work and passed it on to the next artist, following a sort of chain. And I guess you can see that in the visual elements of the artworks and the materials that we've put out as well. So I guess I'll just pass it on to Angela.
Awesome, thank you. So for the first prompt, that was object ontology. It's taken from this philosophical study of existence ontology, that's what it means. And object ontology sort of means the existence of objects and how they sort of exist outside of human interaction, and how they have a charisma of their own internally, and how objects kind of have a life of their own between each other. And it was sort of like a prompt that I came up with to get us thinking about objects as they exist in our interior spaces around us, and to get us sort of outside of our heads and to think of these material things. And so for our first artist, Fang, if you'd like to come up. Hi, Fang. Thanks. So, hi, thank you for coming on here and talking about your work. So your piece was called Central and Real Web Page, and it was a mixed media piece, a sculptural piece alongside a video media piece. What did you take from this concept of object ontology, and how did it influence your art making?
I did quite a bit of research about object ontology. I was kind of confused about the concept, but then when it came to the contrast between visible objects that you can see up front, and versus objects, conceptual objects that you can't really see but it's there. So I was like kind of like interested in the interplay between those two concepts. So that was what inspired the webpage, because like on a webpage you can see, the physical pictures and like the buttons. So that's like in the front, but it couldn't have existed with that code without the code behind it. Yeah, so I think the code is like very important. It's like you can't see the code, but without it, you wouldn't have a website. It's a bit like atoms and matter. Without the atoms, you wouldn't exist. Without atoms, no one would be here, and no objects would exist. So that was what interested me the most about the concept of object ontology and how it kind of inspired my artwork. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I thought it was very interesting when you talk about the digital space and materiality in the digital realm as opposed to the visual or sensual. So the next question, how did you come up with your characters, your iconic sort of illustrative cartoon characters?
I didn't realize this until I talked to Al and Joel previously. I was actually inspired by the Powerpuff Girls. Sugar, spice, everything nice. These were the ingredients chosen to make the cutest little girls. Yeah, that's how I got the Powerpuff Girls. And again with the object ontology thing, it's like so similar. It's like sugar, spice, everything nice. The objects, right? Yeah. It's like their own atoms. It's like the coding behind the Powerpuff Girls. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Also, I thought it was so interesting just thinking conceptually about like the Powerpuff Girls and how you took from that intro from the cartoon, obviously, sugar, spice, everything nice, and this kind of agency in your sculptural piece where you could choose like which character you wanted to be, and at a time like where everything was so like we didn't really have a choice to be in lockdown, and we didn't really have a choice to just like be in the position we were in. It's kind of like interesting thinking about your art as like a nostalgic thing, like thinking back into childhood and like being at home again, but also taking back agency through that childhood nostalgia somehow.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Great, yeah.
So final question we have is, what was your process and how did you handle the 2 weeks? So we gave each artist 2 week time frame to respond to the concept as well as the pieces that we cut up for each artist. So how did you, I think we spoke about it was mainly conceptually driven for you, and you sort of took more time thinking about the idea as opposed to making the work.
Yeah, that's very true, yep. It took me a week. I know it's really long. It took me a week to kind of come up with a concept that I liked, because I was like doing a lot of research about object ontology. Like, finally I got it. And then it took me another week to kind of like get the pieces together, do the cardboard cutouts. It took a lot longer than I expected, actually, because you have to be really precise about how to cut out all these things. And then it took a bit longer to kind of do the music associated with each character. So each character has their own little theme song. And then the video took quite a while, because I had to kind of delete quite a bit of stuff on my computer just for the video to be made, because of like my storage data was a bit,
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that you used obviously a lot of home materials, and found object is obviously included into your video as well. One other thing I just remembered just now about something about the QR code. We talked about the QR code and how that tied into objects and how they're manipulated by these powers outside of ourselves that are impacted by human interference in the form of like commercialization, like marketing and stuff like that. Would you like to expand on that a bit about that side of it and how
that came about?
Yeah, how you came about this thinking about how objects are influenced by these external forces that are human as well.
I think it came from like the website Matter, because it's like the coursework, how to be a superhero. So I kind of like took that element and made the video from that, and then all the music and all the video, it's like kind of like has this hypnotic kind of element to it, the musical elements, because music can actually be used to kind of manipulate how people feel. I'm not sure whether you've heard of it, but do you know about elevator music? Like
kind of, maybe.
Like particular music you hear in like supermarkets, and then it makes you kind of feel like you have to buy more. Yeah, that kind of concept. Yeah.
yeah, super interesting as well. Yeah, so thank you so much for that, Fong, and just expanding on your work. And going off that, the next piece was by Alex, who won't be talking today, but her piece was an Etch-a-Sketch, and it was a sculptural piece made out of fondant, which is like a baking material, and it's made out of sugar. So she took from your work the cartoon aspect of it and this childhood nostalgia. And at the time, she was looking at a lot of Kevin Spanky works. I don't know if you guys are familiar. He does these really intricate Etch-a-Sketch sketches on the Etch-a-Sketch. And at the same time, she was thinking a lot about environmentalism. I think during lockdown, a lot of us, had this moment to really contemplate like our values and the materials that we surround ourselves with and how we consume. And she said, it's interesting that the Etch-a-Sketch is like a substitute for paper. So it's like an environmental substitute. And so, playing on that nostalgia, that home environment, and also home material, which is the fondant. She also said that the work was very therapeutic to make, and it was repetitive because it was a lot of kneading and the material sort of hardens really quickly. I thought that was quite interesting in that during lockdown, we obviously had this like hyper focus on repetition and routine and self-therapy. And from that, we had Kira's work, which was also Etch-a-Sketch, but it wasn't sculpture, it was a video media work, and it was sort of like a combination of ripped videos from YouTube played within this Etch-a-Sketch frame that looked like a TV. So she said she took from Alex's piece that the Etch-a-Sketch kind of looked like a TV for her. And she comes from this background of music. And so it's interesting to hear her talk about how during lockdown, Spotify, the top played songs are from like the 80s and 90s. And again, going back to this idea of like nostalgia and like nostalgia we have with objects in our home, and reflection on sort of past aesthetics like vintage TV, vintage cartoons, and these are all elements in her work if you get to see it. And with that, I will pass on to Carla for the next artist.
Thank you. So following Kira's work, we had Debbie. And then after Debbie, we had Tim, who I'd like to welcome to the front.
Hello.
So Tim's work was called Information Stops Flowing But Still Cute.
Yep, that's correct.
So Tim, I want to start by asking you how your work was shaped by Debbie's artwork prompt.
Okay, so the snippet that I got from Debbie's work was really, it was very out of my comfort zone. I didn't really know how to react because their work was poetry. Wow, my voice is really loud. It was poetry, white text on a black background, but I kind of thought about it a lot, and then there's this one bit of that snippet where it's like it repeats in, out, and then it just gets stuck on like in, and I thought that was like very similar to how like data is like processed like through the like our devices and stuff. So I was like, maybe I'll do something like technology, something along those lines. And I was just, the whole piece also like made me feel very empty and like alone. So I was like, I wanted to try and like capture that feeling in my piece, yeah.
Yeah, so the emptiness is actually something that I thought was a unique part of your process, and something that differentiated your work from Debbie's work and Henry's work. Would you want to talk some more about your creative process generally and how you went from feeling something and being inspired by a feeling to translating it into an artwork?
Right. So from Debbie's artwork, I was like trying to, I was like thinking about like things that could fit into like data and feeling like alone. And I was kind of like thinking about like our old devices and stuff. How like we just like throw them away, and then what's left of it is pretty much just like the material, which is just plastic and metal. And I thought like that was kind of interesting to me, like how the meaning of it kind of like gets removed and it just becomes an object. That's where I wanted to play around with. Yeah. Did I answer the question right?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I guess then just going off of that, did you want to talk some more about...
my process, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I forgot that bit. So the process was like, I thought about it for a really long time, and then I just like did a bunch of sketches, thinking about like what sort of like elements would fit, and then I would like reiterate my sketches. I would like draw the things that might fit, or like objects that might fit like in different ways, and then from there like I pick which thing looks nice to me, and I try to like piece things together from that, and then it becomes like I take that into like a digital, like on my iPad, and I just like clean it up and put colors.
Yeah. Okay. So I then want to ask how your work specifically was influenced by the theme of object ontology.
So I think it's like, sorry, like I was really like focused on the removing like human interaction with the object, because like when we use things, like we place value onto objects, and I feel like object ontology is like the opposite, right? So I wanted to like explore like in a kind of like fun way, like like to try make people kind of think like, oh, what does become of this thing that we used to use but don't use anymore? And like it's kind of like the purpose kind of like is not there anymore. And I thought that was like kind of an interesting thing. So that's what I kind of wanted to portray in my work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then considering your work is inspired by how humans give meaning to objects of technology, how would you describe your perspective on the meaning of objects in existing alone?
Okay. I think objects like man-made objects are like, we like create meaning, we give these objects like meaning, and then when we don't use them, they kind of just become trash, right? That versus like an object in nature, right, where it kind of has like a life cycle, or like it's a part of the ecological system, where it's like it turns into like a tree grows from the ground, right? And then it like dies and turns back into like the stuff in the ground. Whereas like our trash, like our like old stuff, doesn't really do that without like humans like recycling it. So I thought that was kind of interesting, like, cause like plastic and stuff like doesn't return to like what it was by itself, unless there's like humans intervention. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to now pass to Lily, who's going to move on to the next theme of futurism.
All right. So when we were coming up with these prompts, I think Angela started the conceptualization of her prompt first, object ontology, and it was very much based in the current situation that we were in. But then I thought of the future, right? Like, how can we as young people here living in Melbourne not get stuck in the current situation of pandemic and isolation and just looking at our objects in our bedrooms and bringing them to life in our imaginary worlds? I was like, okay, but how do we create the vision of a future where we think that we can live in or belong to? And I got that idea from this theory called Afrofuturism, which is really explored in like sci-fi and speculative fiction and stuff like that. And I really drew on Octavia E. Butler's work of Parable of the Sower series, because I really leaned on that before and during pandemic, actually. It's like an apocalyptic world and all about survival, and it really reminded me of 2020. And I was like, yeah. So we came up with a little prompt, and then we asked artists to respond to those prompts in whatever medium fashion they wanted to, or it might even be like some people might even want to, like some artists want to look back in the past and then think of that as a way to reflect on the future. So that's how we came up with that prompt. And I think I'm passing it to you now to talk about your first artist.
Yeah. So we found a lot of connections, I guess, between the futurism prompt and the artworks from the futurism prompt and the object ontology prompt. And you can see a lot of those threads in the themes like technology, and the progression of time, and Amira's work, Pandemic Birthdays, I guess reflects that, because Amira, this is a photographic collage where Amira sort of envisages a future of repetition, and you can see that in the multiples of her in the work, and just birthdays constantly in lockdown. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah. And then we had two artists who are not here today, unfortunately, Melissa and Sarah. And their artworks kind of really play off each other, as you can see. You can definitely see where they have responded to each other. And Melissa said to me that she wanted me to relay this to you guys. It was thinking of separation and how these two figures couldn't be together any longer because of the current situation, but then also when they could be together again. So it was kind of like a juxtaposition. And then we have an artist here today who's actually going to have a little talk with us about her piece. Steph, would you like to come up? Okay, so your piece is titled Outside, Inside, Out. And we might need to borrow a mic. Thank you. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is better. Thanks. Okay, so tell us about your piece. Why the name and why the medium of videography, but also a mixture of videography and painting? And specifically, you're outdoors in your piece.
Yeah, so when I was filming the painting that I was doing on my mask, it was actually kind of right outside my apartment, and it was on the balcony that I spent a lot of time during lockdown in. So I feel like the balcony for me was a very significant location for me, looking back to 2020. And so right outside of my balcony, you can kind of see the furniture still behind me through the glass. So that was kind of, for me, like the past. And then at the same time, you could see the sky, the moving clouds that were reflected from the glass. So that was, for me, like the future. So the title Outside, Inside, Out was kind of just balancing the kind of locating ourselves on the line that's between the past and the future. And the same with kind of painting on the mask as well. We're outside in open area, but we're still kind of behind the mask.
Yeah, totally. So what parts of the previous artist artwork were you inspired by in coming up with your piece?
Yeah, so I think the snippet that the little prompt that I got was the mandala and the picture of the trees. So I took the inspiration from the picture of the trees and then incorporated that into my work because that really reminded me of kind of peace and reminded me of the outside, which was so far away during lockdown. And going back to the last question about the video work as well, I thought that video documentation was so part of our, a huge part of our lives during lockdown with kind of Zoom and video vlogging, that kind of stuff. So I really wanted to incorporate that element into my work as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved your piece. I thought it was very much 2020 in a nutshell. And also, I know a lot of artists have been incorporating masks into their artwork now because it's almost like a time capsule of the current situation.
Yeah.
What inspired you to include the mask in your piece?
I think it's just the significance of the mask being a symbol of last year, and it was something that connected every one of us around the world. So it was such like a significant object that represented that time, and yeah, at the same time, it's like a time capsule. So I wanted to put that picture of the outside on the mask that was kind of the object that was keeping us together.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Do you have any questions you want to ask? No. Well, in that case, thank you so much for the quick chat. Anything you want to say?
No, I think that's all. Yeah, I think I was really inspired by the futurism prompt as well. Futurism for me was kind of letting go and looking forward, but at the same time, there's so many things holding us back as well. And the future is kind of a result of the past as well, so we can't really look at the future without considering the past and the present.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for talking to us about that, especially now that we're actually in the future, I guess, right? Compared to where we were before. Great. So I think thank you so much. Do you want me to hold on to that? Do you want to say something? Yeah. Yeah, I can go. So now we've got the lovely Imogen, who's going to come up and have a chat with us. Thank you. Hi, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. This is fun. So your piece is actually untitled. Is there a reason it's untitled?
I was originally going to title it, but then as I was thinking about what I could call it, I thought that it was kind of appropriate to leave it untitled because it was like a documentation, like I made an image of how I felt a bit lost. Like after, because this was like, I think it was towards the end of the scene that it's actually from. I got the idea towards, so that was like the end of November-ish, and like when we were starting to come back to things, but like it was still everything was still a bit weird. I'm still wearing a mask at work, and everything was still just so exhausting, and we didn't really know what was going to happen. And we ended up having issues around Christmas and stuff like that. So I thought just the feeling of being lost in time was suitable to have no title for it.
Yeah. Really poignant, actually. Yeah. But you do, even though your piece is untitled, you have a really significant story around the the conceptualization of your piece, right? I think I read a bit of it here today. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, I'd finished a long work shift, and I was on my way driving down from Carnegie to Frankston down the freeway, and to see my grandparents who I hadn't seen for a bit. Because lockdown.
How long haven't you seen them for?
It'd probably been a couple months at that point. And then the exhaustion of being at work and just everything, because in lockdown you kind of feel like you're always going, but at the same time you're not doing anything at all. So then it kind of caught up to me in a way. But seeing all the clouds, so I'm driving along this freeway 100 k's an hour, but seeing all the clouds, and the clouds look like they're not moving in a way, because they're so far away, it just has that effect. And it kind of felt like how we were stuck, and we didn't really know when everything was going to end and when it was going to be safer again. I think that's probably about it. Yeah.
The clouds really do link into the previous snapshot of Steph's work. Is that what kind of inspired you a bit, or what parts of the prompt, of the futurism prompt, were you responding to?
Yeah, well, so in terms of how it linked to the previous artwork, it was the clouds, because in the video work prior, it's you can see the trees being painted on the mask, but the clouds in the background, because the video was sped up, it was a bit mesmerizing as well, and that just kind of, I kept coming back to that scene when I was driving, when I was thinking about what I'm going to do to follow on to that video work. So yeah, that would definitely be the connection between the previous one and my artwork. And then the futurism, rather than it being about the future, it's kind of about the uncertainty in regards to the future.
Well, I mean, definitely, because your road doesn't really lead to anywhere, does it?
Yeah, it's kind of got a bit of a hint that it keeps going.
It keeps going.
But other than that, you can't really see an end.
No, definitely. I think that I see that in your piece as well. It is a road that is going, and it looks like it could be heading somewhere, but it's untitled, right? It's not known yet. So yeah, amazing. And just a final question to wrap up. Why Signal Curators? What brought you to this group, and what inspired you to volunteer to submit your artwork into this?
Well, I first joined a while ago because I wanted the opportunity to do more with my art than just make it and be oh, Mum, Dad, my friends, here's this thing I made. Yeah. And so through being able to actually do exhibitions and know about how all that works, it was a really interesting thing to do to kind of further my art making. And it's I discovered it was super fun to also talk about all that with other people who shared the same interests, and also to see what other people are making. So that's been really good this whole time.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you like it, and this is fun, so cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and I think, do you guys want to say anything before we move on to our last artist? No? All right then. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and last but not least, we have Bridie. Would you love to come up? Yay. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Okay, just a few questions. So your artwork is mesmerizing and beautiful. I love it. It's called Deep in Thought. Mm-hmm. Once again, why that name? I'm really curious.
Yeah, it's a bit of a long explanation, but the aim of my artwork was to really look at the psychological impact of lockdown, and I wanted to do that through creating, kind of depicting the space in the mind. So I think for me, lockdown was really if you think of like the external world, bringing sort of things to your life, like, you know, value, you get value from like your friends, from the things you achieve externally, and you also get perceived by people. And like, say if you create stuff externally, you kind of see a part of yourself in what you create. So through lockdown, I feel like that external world got really restricted, and you kind of got forced into this more internal world. So that's what I really wanted to kind of, you know, create the feeling of being in someone's mind. So that's where the name comes in, Deep in Thought, because it's really, if you look at it, the main, the larger face has its eyes closed, which symbolise that it's kind of, you know, shut out to the external world, and then you have a smaller figure that's looking out into the space, which symbolises like looking out into the mind, kind of the mindscape. So that's where the name comes from.
No, great. So what you talked a bit about some of the elements in the piece that had symbols. So the first like front piece. What other elements did you incorporate to try and tell a story or a message?
So I mean, as I was talking about before, like with being perceived in the external world, I feel like that's really important for identity, and also meaning. Just like knowing who you are, kind of having that reflected back at you through the external world. So without that, I felt like you kind of lose some sort of like gauge on who you are. So in the artwork, there's this eye in the corner, which kind of symbolises this viewer that we create in our own mind that like views us. Kind of an abstract viewer. It's like part you but partly not you. I really wanted to explore like when you kind of get stuck in like viewing yourself, but you're not, like maybe it's a bit judgy, or maybe it's like a bit more analytical. It's kind of this like viewer who's viewing you. So that's what that one symbolises. There's also this like orb on the other side, which is kind of more up to interpretation, I think, and people who I've shown it to, they all see something different in the orb, which is really interesting. But I think it kind of has a rough meaning that it's to do with like exploring your thoughts, and kind of, I think a lot of people in their mind have things that you can't fully comprehend about ourselves, maybe because it's just like the nature of the mind. We can't fully get like an objective view of what's going on in ourselves. So that's what that's kind of trying to symbolise.
And in your creative process, so what parts of the prompt that we passed on were you more drawn to that caused you to have this creative output, or the previous artwork from the previous artist, so from Imogen?
So I got a little snippet of Imogen's, which was The Road, which was really, I mean, I just like got really inspired by that. I think like just the idea of progress, because I did my artwork, I think maybe only one other person was in the same situation as me, which we did our artwork after lockdown.
I think probably 2 or 3 of you guys. You're the last one for the Futurism Echo. You're finishing it off for us, so
so I think that was really interesting, just reflecting on like progress and journey and like coming out of lockdown, and I think what really inspired me was like the transition that we're all making. I mean, if you think about the internal space in the mind and then transitioning back into that external space, and I think a lot of people are having trouble to like, go back and find the meaning that they once had in the external space, and also, connecting back with people, and like being perceived again. I found that really interesting, just like, it feels weird to get out of my mind, to get out of my like that internal space.
Awesome. And speaking of connecting back with people, how did you feel joining Signal Curators and coming to the meetings in person finally, and connecting with like-minded people? And where would you like to see your artwork go in the future?
Yeah, I mean, Signal Curators has been amazing. It's been like so good to get support on my art and also be with other artists. Because I'm not studying art, I'm actually doing politics as my uni degree. So I actually feel like quite, like if I'm just like doing art by myself, it's quite lonely, and it's also, just a lot harder because you're not inspired by other people. So it's been so great to like be with people. Meet all you guys.
Awesome.
Sorry, what was the next part?
Just where would you like to see your artwork go in the future? I mean, you've said that you're not studying art, but that doesn't mean that you can't. I mean, you definitely have the skills. Your artwork's amazing.
Oh, thank you. I don't know. It's kind of hard. I really want to be making more art, but I mean, because I've got uni and other things, it's like hard to fit it in. But I mean, I definitely want to keep coming to Signal Creators, so hopefully that will, give me the space to do some more art. I have a dream of like starting a little business, doing some like clothes designing. But it all really depends on time. But
yeah, maybe that could be part of Signal too, if they started like little fashion segment of
Who knows?
But thank you so much for the talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. We loved having you. And I think we're going to wrap it up now. Thanks.
So we just want to conclude by saying thank you to all the artists that have spoken tonight, those who participated in the exhibition, the curators within Signal, and these guys, and just generally say thank you for being here tonight and thank you for watching. Yeah.